hate you. I fucking hate you.
Hey, do you guys like magic? I like casting spells, and to continue the trend of the occasional video about something completely random, let's talk about this silly cardboard game. Magic is a fun card game. Universes Beyond is what got me into it, and I like it when character from media I like is adapted well. And Magic has insane respect for the source material. Like, why the fuck was the Assassin's Creed set so good and such a faithful and respectful adaptation of a fucking Ubisoft IP? I really love it when certain cards have such good synergy with cards from completely different IPs. And if an IP I like isn't represented...
Fine. I'll do it myself.
And for the one person asking, yes. Now, as we all know, Commander is the only format. This game that was made in 1993 was always designed to be a 4-player free-for-all. Every card was always designed to fit into 100-card singleton format, and every card was always designed around the fact that your deck was built around a specific legendary creature. And you know what? You have 100 cards. That's a lot. So what if we made some exceptionally powerful cards that can give you those rare high moments to make some games more memorable? Oh, not those ones. Those are too good. Don't use those. But yeah, look at these really well-designed Magic cards that are really cool and definitely not sins of game design. But Sol Ring is fine because it's printed a lot? Okay, in all seriousness, Sol Ring is a card that was created back when they thought these cards were fine. And even though it's not as stupid as, say, a Black Lotus or any of the mocks, it's still absurdly strong for the same reason, and that is positive mana. The only reason why Sol Ring is not hundreds and hundreds of dollars is because it's printed in every precon. Mana Crypt, a mana rock that I personally think is weaker, especially at lower power levels, is around $80. And the only format that it's legal in is fucking Vintage, and even then it's still restricted. The reason why Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Dockside Extortionist were banned because fast mana is the strongest thing in the game. Black Lotus, which is widely regarded as the strongest card in all of Magic, all it does is just give you 3 mana for 1 turn. Sol Ring is insanely broken. Being able to play 4 or even 5 drops on turn 2 is insanely broken. I've had so many games where one person gets a turn 1 or 2 Sol Ring and then wins solely because of the early game extra mana and resources. Now, getting a Sol Ring after, say, turn 4 honestly isn't that big of a deal. The thing that makes the card broken in Commander is the early game resource advantage it can give you. In a casual game of Commander, most players won't have a turn 1 play, either because they just don't have one or they play a tap land on their first turn. How is someone who only has access to 1 land supposed to compete with someone who has triple the resources they do at the start of the game? One defense for Sol Ring that I have heard is that having an early Sol Ring makes you the target and arch enemy, but I have found that in practice, the extra resources Sol Ring grants you more than makes up for the large target on your back. The Sol Ring person still has at least double the mana you have, and at the end of the day, you still have 2 other opponents than the one guy with Sol Ring, so if you use all your removal on that one guy, then you won't have any left to deal with your other 2 opponents. Another defense I've heard for Sol Ring is that it makes people play greedy when they have it in their opening hand. People will keep a bad opening hand just because it has Sol Ring, and I do not think that this is a good defense. There are 2 outcomes to someone keeping a bad hand that has a Sol Ring. Either they get punished by their hubris and are not able to pull any cards that help them, and then they just lose because they have no good cards, or their hubris is rewarded and they get really good top decks that they had no idea were there and it just saved them. Both situations are not good, as in the first situation, they're just not enjoying the game, or the second situation where they just win even harder, which then encourages them to repeat this behavior in the future. Both of these are bad outcomes. Yes, the first one could be considered a learning experience, but this is an issue that is caused basically only by Sol Ring, and would just stop being an issue if you just didn't run Sol Ring. By simply having Sol Ring in your deck, you enable the possibility of it being in your opening hand. In a game with 4 players, each with a free mulligan, having everyone go through 14 cards or more each, it's not that uncommon to see at least one person get a Sol Ring on turn 1 or 2. And situations like this just make me want to ban the card. The game is more fun if no one runs it, to avoid situations like this. It's a perfect prisoner's dilemma. There is the good option of no one running Sol Ring, or the selfish option of running Sol Ring yourself. The good option only works if everyone does it, but you will not be able to convince a whole table to stop running it, because as we all know, Magic Player is mutually exclusive with Sane Person. I honestly think that the format would be a lot more enjoyable if the possibility of a turn 1 Soul Ring was just removed entirely, but Soul Ring dodged the ban. I guess because it's in every precon? A card being iconic to a format does not mean it's good. Do we want to go back to Hogak? Wait, Modern isn't a real format. Only Commander is the only real format. Do we want to go back to when Golos was the only Commander? I'm sorry, but I've literally never heard a single convincing argument to run Soul Ring in your decks other than if you are just a greedy bastard. Like, I'm sorry, Elk, I love you, but this video is just flat out wrong.
When the Worm player gets a lucky Soul Ring opener at the table, it can level the playing field against more powerful decks. Soul Ring can act as an equalizer here, and when the luck goes opposite and the stronger deck gets it, it's not as impactful as it would be in a weaker deck. Simply put, it increases the variance of Commander even more so, which you can't deny is part of the point of the Commander format, it being singleton and all.
I'm sorry, but this is just straight up false. The argument that Soul Ring helps out bad decks more than it helps out good decks is just actually factually incorrect. Soul Ring and all mana generation cards are only as good as the cards they help you cast, so having access to more resources means you can cast more of your stronger cards. I shouldn't need to explain why I'm more scared of a strong deck with a Soul Ring than a weak deck with a Soul Ring. And if a deck is only competitive if it has Soul Ring, then it's a poorly made deck. Now, I will agree with you, building decks that not only don't run Soul Ring, but wouldn't greatly benefit from having Soul Ring is very fun. The first deck I ever built that didn't have Soul Ring was an Athreos Shadowborn Apostle meme deck based on Darkest Dungeon 2. It was here I realized I would rather top deck a Shadowborn Apostle than a Soul Ring, and because the deck relies so much on colored mana, I just didn't run Soul Ring. And this is what spiraled me down realizing that the game is more fun without this horribly designed card. And one of the reasons why I think that not only the game, but also the process of deck building is more fun without Soul Ring is this: consistency.
Anytime you put a new card in your commander deck, you should always subject yourself to the test of, one, if I could choose to have this in my opening hand every turn, would I? And two, if I got to do that, how much better would those games be for me than a game where I never saw it? If every commander player asked themselves those two questions every single time they slotted in one powerful card just because they have it, the world would be a better place. We would live in an EDH utopia.
Soul Ring inherently makes your deck less consistent, because the games where you pull it, you have a significantly better performance than the games where you do not pull it. As someone who likes to refine my decks to be as consistent as possible, I despise this. The more consistent your deck, the more fun it is. A few of my friends have made some funny meme decks that are only ever viable if they get an early Soul Ring. And yes, it is funny to play Alexios from the command zone on turn 2, but for a real game without shitpost decks, Soul Ring just ruins the consistency and makes the game less fun. And again, the main reason is just because of the potential of getting it early game. Late game, it's fine. Mana rocks like Thran Dynamo and Relic of Sauron are better mana rocks to have on the field, but these are balanced by the fact that they are not playable on turn 1 to ruin the early game, and they are also not mana positive the turn they are played. The whole point of ramping is the risk-reward of not playing any real cards to then have more resources later on. Soul Ring does not follow this aspect of risk and reward, as it is always mana positive, so there is basically no reason to not play Soul Ring if you have it, unless you really need colored mana. But in decks that are that dependent on colored mana, just don't run Soul Ring, Lamau. This leads into the fact that building around not having Soul Ring makes your deck a lot more interesting. And one of the best examples of this is my Soundwave deck. In this deck, I run Urza Saga, a card I normally don't run because I don't like Soul Ring. However, in this deck, I am running this specifically for the second ability, creating the Construct. But because I don't have Soul Ring, I needed to add things that Urza Saga could fetch to make it actually worth including, which led me to two slightly obscure one-drop artifacts, Ghost Vacuum and Dino DNA. Both of these cards are fetchable from Urza Saga and act as graveyard hate, and can reanimate creatures as evasive tokens, which is what the deck wants to trigger Soundwave's ability. Building around not using Soul Ring makes the process of deck building way more interesting, even if it is just as simple as opening up one spot for another more interesting synergy piece. Now, if anyone at Wizards or anyone with influence is watching this, I understand not being able to ban Sol Ring, but with the new bracket system, we could at least make Sol Ring a game changer, right? I cannot think of any other one-drop that changes the game as much as Sol Ring does. And the argument against this of Bracket 2 disallows game changers doesn't work because there are some precons that have game changers in them, and there's also some precons that have banned cards. So hey, I guess this means that Sol Ring being in precons is not a valid reason to keep it unbanned. You could just change Bracket 2 to be, say, under 3 game changers, as I believe that there are a bunch of cards that do need to be added to the game changer list, like Field of the Dead and Farewell, so game changers would end up being a lot more common. So those are my thoughts on Commander's most iconic and evil card. I genuinely implore you to try to convince your playgroup to stop running Sol Ring, as I bet you two have had at least a few games where an early Sol Ring snowballs into a win, and the game would have gone so much differently without this broken card. Let me know what you think, and while you're down there, do the YouTube things, like and subscribe. I doubt I will ever make another video about Magic, but who knows, this channel is just me rambling about my special interests, so it might come up again.